So, hello everyone and welcome. This is week 6 of the Planting Our Seeds program in relationship with Grandmother's Voice. I'm so very glad that you have stuck with us over these weeks. If this is your first week here, you are certainly most welcome. My name is Daniel. I assist the town with moderating some of our free virtual programs. I'm joined by two of my coworkers here who are going to lead us through just some quick openings. I'm just going to spotlight Tanya. Tanya is going to lead us through our program preparation today. There you are, Tanya.
Welcome, everyone. So today I went to the Oakville Museum to visit the memorial that is growing in honor of the Indigenous children whose unmarked graves were recently discovered at the site of Kamloops Residential School. While at the museum today, I was also reminded of the ceremony held by the grandmothers this past fall for the Red Dress Project that honored murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Both installations, the worn shoes for the children and the red dresses for the women and girls, are very powerful and stark reminders of the history and ongoing reality faced by Indigenous people on this land. As I walked around the grounds of the Iroquois estate, I reflected on this land and what I know about it. It's treaty land and traditional territory of the Mississaugas, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee. It's sacred lands of treaties 14 and 22. It's land covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. And it's colonized land settled by Robert Chisholm and then called Oakville. Non-Indigenous people on this land must face the truth as settlers, that settler colonialism is an ongoing process that continues to have present-day impacts on the lives of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Each of us who is non-Indigenous is responsible to make a commitment to do the work, to get involved, to seek the truth, to unlearn, learn, relearn, change, and adapt ourselves. So I want to thank Jody and Sherry for all your time over these past few weeks, for your words, your honesty, and I'm grateful for this program, the conversations that we have, and the work that we're all doing in our community. So with this, I pass it on to
Daniel.
Dan.
Thank you, Tanya. Just some quick instructions for those joining us for the first time. We have enabled the chat box function. This allows you to communicate with everyone publicly. If you have a question, you are welcome to use the digital reactions for your hands up. You can also private message any individual identified as host. If you have any questions that you don't necessarily want prompted to the group, or if you're having technical challenges, there's many who can assist. Otherwise, we do ask you to remain on mute. It looks like we're just creeping over 75 participants. If we aren't on mute, it can get a little bit noisy, and certainly we want to ensure that we're hearing tonight and listening. This is open to the public. It is free for everyone and anyone, so we ask that everyone respect one another and each other's perspectives. This is particularly important tonight as we start to unpack some really challenging information. This program is recorded. We do allow folks to the program at a later date. Moving into our participation agreements, we just covered these before we start each discussion. We ask that everyone who's participating remain engaged throughout the session. I know that 8 weeks, 8 hours can be a long time, but we're all doing this together, and we ask that you stay engaged with us. Also notably, be prepared to experience discomfort, particularly if you are someone who is new to learning about Indigenous culture and history. There is a lot of unacceptable realities that we have to disclose, and of those, they may cause great discomfort, but it's important that you understand that that's why you're here. We also want you to understand that your truth is subjective to you, and you're welcome to speak it. We just ask that you do so in a way that respects everyone. And especially if you're receiving new information, we ask that you be willing to hear that, to hear new truths. Finally, you need to accept and expect non-closure. The conversations we are having are so broad in nature, and existing over so much time in history that we don't always have all the answers, especially when some of the questions we have are emotive. So it has to be okay for us to leave sometimes, knowing that we didn't actually get closure and that this is part of a journey for learning. With that, I know I have mentioned that this evening's conversation is going to be challenging, so I ask that Nabil can just lead us through a little bit of further instruction.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, and I think, this session today we can talk about certain things that can be triggering to a lot of us. And it would be unfair to not talk about those things given what we know now. There was a quote that I heard from Gabor Mate, the famous Canadian physician, and he said, "It's not what you know, it's what you can know." And given what we have found out and what we have known, 215 unmarked graves for children, it's about what we can know. And so, platforms like this allows us the opportunity to know more. And sometimes knowing more can be uncomfortable. And sometimes knowing more can be triggering. And sometimes knowing more can bring back trauma. And so we want to be very conscious of that. And we want to be able to provide resources to everybody here so that in case they find themselves in those situations, that they can contact the appropriate spaces where support is available. So the Indigenous focused crisis numbers I just wanted to share with you guys is one is for the Lifeline Canada Foundation. These are 24/7. They're available at no cost. And the other one is the Indian Residential School Survivors and Family at the number listed there. For those of us who are non-Indigenous and these questions or these conversations can be triggering for us or distressing for us, then the numbers that I've put forward is also for the Distress Center of Halton and then the Suicide Crisis Hotline, which is Canada-wide. Again, these are 24/7. They're available at absolutely no cost. And before I wanted to move over to the next slide, I really wanted to let everybody know that it's okay for our eyes to weep. And it's okay for our hearts to hurt. But as a non-Indigenous settler in this land, the strongest body part that matters to me today is my shoulders. And if our Indigenous brothers and sisters needs that shoulder to lean on, then I need to make that shoulder available. And metaphorically speaking, of course, that platform is today to hear the voices of our Indigenous brothers and sisters and to give them the platform so that it's not about what we know, but it's about what we can know and what we can do. Now, in the next slide, I just want to highlight that as these conversations can become quite intense, I'm actually finding myself, breathing very shallow as I'm speaking to you guys right now. And, when we're breathing very shallow, that's an onset to know that, our anxieties are becoming very heightened. So just an activity that I would like to share with you guys, if you find yourself in that particular situation, something we can ground ourselves with is something that's just called belly breathing. And essentially, when we take shallow breaths, we almost exclusively breathe from our chest. But we know that breathing from our diaphragm is what allows a lot more air to come into the system and hence calm our nerves down just a little bit, right? So if everybody can just do this once with me, we put one hand on our chest, one hand right below our chest or above our belly. And we want to take a deep breath and we want to make sure it's from our belly that we're breathing. So we want to see our belly expand. And I have a pretty large surface area for my belly, so it's not hard for me, but for some of you it might be a little bit harder. But you put your hand on your belly, you take a deep breath for about 3 seconds, you hold it for 3 seconds, and then you release it from your mouth for about 4 seconds. So we breathe in from the nose, 3 seconds, hold it for 3 seconds, release it for 4 with our mouth. So here we go. And we're breathing in with our nose. Watch your stomach expand. We're holding it for 3 seconds. And we're releasing it for 4. We can do this 3 to 10 times, or as much time as you need. But it's really important to highlight that when you find breathing getting shallow, this is a good activity to catch your breath essentially. And so with that, I want to pass it on to our good friends, Jody and Sherry.
Thanks so much, Nabil and Danielle, Tanya, and Andrew is our sound guy in the back room. So thanks so much for being here. Welcome, Jody. Hello.
Hey, Sherry. Hi, Scano, everyone. So nice to see everyone back again. My puppy here has decided to get into some things. So she's coming. She can feel us. She can feel us today. And I'll just acknowledge that this is our time to welcome everyone and be grateful and thankful that we've come together from wherever we are in this moment, grounded now. Nabil, Nyama very much for that, for grounding us and really bringing us present, because these conversations are all about being conscious and present in your body, and really knowing that the information that we've been sharing over the last few weeks, when we get into deep conversation, it doesn't just live in your mind. That's when we talk about that, the mind and the journey from the heart to the mind, or whichever way you're going right now, whichever direction it is, it also travels within your body. And so, Nabil, that was a really great exercise, and it's what we do when we're on the land. And I don't want to start this conversation with heavy stories, but I feel like I need to share this because it's always about the land, and it's always about acknowledging the energies of what Mother Earth offers us. And so this conversation, I can already feel, is going to bring tears for someone who is very important to me. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but I was a hairstylist for 20 years in Halton. So I know a lot of you. I know a lot of your family, probably. I know a lot of your stories. But yesterday we finished planting on the garden, and it was really beautiful, Sherry, like just to know that, it's there. And, and some of our friends came to visit to, I think, to see for their own eyes that we created something like this. And it wasn't just us, it was like what Nabil said, the shoulders of you and our community members that, thought to take some of that heaviness from Sherry and I, because the work that we do is, it's not easy, but it's what we're called to do. We're called to use our gifts, and then the gifts that we've learned to carry through, in our bundle, support the real work that we have to do by servicing and being of service to other people. And so it was just timely. I got home last night and I just felt so full of love and happiness because we created this amazing healing garden that is so unbelievable. It's made that whole space come to life. And right when I got home, I received a message from this young man. He actually went to the Catholic board school, one of the schools here in Halton, and I cut his hair from the time he was like 10. And now he's 24. And he called me because he found out he had cancer. And he said, come on, out of everybody, he called his hairstylist. Right? Like, I'm thinking, seriously, what an honor. And just to kind of cut the story to the purpose of it is that he, by 9 a.m., was out at the land this morning, because I got to tell him that the grandmothers and the Indigenous ancestors and the community made this space happen. And he went there and he laid in the middle of it, in the exact same space, Sherry, that we did pipe ceremony for all those children. And the children came and they sent him there. And we're doing this in our community. This is our community created this. And I'm just so grateful that we've had this space and that we can share that story, and we can, trust that it's happening for a reason, and perfect.
Mhm. Mhm. Thanks, Jody. This work is, like Jody said, very hard, and I don't even know this young man, but the very fact that the healing garden is created and is there for healing and there for that young man. And we have a very difficult next 45 minutes with you. And it's going to leave you probably raw, and it's going to leave you asked with probably even more questions. We're going to try and take care of you as best we can virtually. I'm going to light my smudge pretty soon, but I'm going to let you know what's going to happen in the next little while. We have a video that we want to share with you. It's a statement from Justice Sinclair, Commissioner Justice Sinclair, who is senator as well, but he's made a statement in honor of the unmarked graves, the children in the unmarked graves, 215. And like Jody said, there's been many memorials. There's one in Milton at the bandshell. There's one down at Oakville Museum. And of course, at the land that we had one yesterday with, or the day before, sorry, with the grandmothers. When we first heard about the news too on Friday, our hearts were broken. And it reminded us very closely. My mom's a residential school survivor, and there's people in here too who have relatives that were affected by that as well. And I had an auntie that I never met, and my auntie was only 4, and they found her in an unmarked grave as well. So this work is very near and dear to our hearts, and it also affects us. But we're also here to share this knowledge and this wisdom, not that we wisdom, but we have wisdom with you. And thanks, Jody, for lighting that smudge. And, so I want to go, what we're going to talk about is Justice Sinclair is going to do the video for a few minutes, about roughly 8 minutes. And then we're going to talk a little bit about it. And we want you guys to open up if you want to have any sort of questions, any sort of just revelations, any sort of comments, please. This is a time for you as well as a time for healing. And then we're going to give you some takeaways, 7 things that you can do after we leave here to take care of yourself as well. And then I think that's and then Daniel might show just where you can go to lay your shoes in Oakville, because you guys are in Oakville. We've got one here in Milton, but in Oakville, go and have that opportunity and have that and even do something for yourself. So I just want to, I think, Andrew, if you don't mind showing the video, and we'll get right into it. And I'm also going to keep my sage burning while we're watching this video.
Bonjour, friends, relatives, survivors. I'm Murray Sinclair, former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. I wanted to take an opportunity to speak to you for a few minutes about the situation that has come to the public's eye about the discovery of bodies at the residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia, here in Canada. When I was asked to chair the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I thought that I had a pretty good idea of what to expect. My experience as a lawyer, as a judge, as the co-chair of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry of Manitoba in the early 1990s, had given me a considerable amount of information about what Indigenous people had experienced here in Canada. And I thought that residential schools were part of the story, but that there was a lot more that would relate to what was going on outside the community in this current day and age. Discovering what was going on in the schools, I thought, would be accomplished by listening to what survivors told us and recording their stories. And I undertook that part of the work openly, willingly, with a what I thought was a good understanding of what they were going to tell us. And they did share with us a great deal of information about their individual experiences in the schools, about having been taken away from their families at such young ages. We called our interim report, "They Came for the Children," for that very reason. We wanted to draw the attention of the Canadian public to the fact that the Government of Canada set out in a deliberate policy to remove the children away from their parents, from their communities, and from the influences of their elders, their brothers, their sisters, in order to indoctrinate them into a different culture. And they accomplished that to a large extent. By the thousands, children were taken away and placed in those institutions called residential schools. And we identified the people who were responsible for that policy, for those decisions. The Prime Minister of the day, Sir John A. Macdonald, led the way, but he was assisted in his public leadership by others. Egerton Ryerson, who had developed a proposal about public schools, himself said that public schools should be available for the little white children of the settlements and the colonies, because the Indigenous children were not smart enough, that they were inferior and couldn't be educated in the same way and would not be eligible to become leaders in Canadian society because they were so uncivilized and heathens and savages. But the stories from the survivors proved to be pretty horrendous. And one of the most common stories that we heard were from survivors who talked about the children who died in the schools and whose deaths they witnessed. We heard about children who died from accidents, children who died from beatings, children who died when they ran away and never returned. We heard about some of the children who even took their own lives. We heard about children who deliberately burned down the schools and in that way caused the deaths of children in the schools. And we heard about, of course, the abuses they experienced. We heard about the day-to-day violence that they experienced. But just as often, for every single one of them, we heard about the loneliness. We heard about the separation from their family. We heard about how they lost so much to what they experienced in the schools. But the one aspect of residential schools that really proved to be quite shocking to me personally was the stories that we began to gather of the children who died in the schools, of the children who died sometimes deliberately at the hands of others who were there, and in such large numbers. Survivors talked about, during the time that they were there, about children who suddenly went missing. Some of the survivors talked about witnessing children being buried in large numbers into mass burial sites. Some of the survivors talked about infants who were born to young girls at the residential schools who had been fathered by priests, having those infants taken away from them and deliberately killed, sometimes by being thrown into furnaces, they told us. We had no expectation that this would be part of the work that we were doing, so we asked the government to allow us to conduct a fuller inquiry into that part of the work of the TRC in order to explore that on behalf of the survivors and the Canadian public. We submitted a proposal because it was not within our mandate, and we asked that it be funded by the government, and that request was denied. And so largely we did what we could, but it was not anywhere near what we needed to accomplish and needed to investigate. And now we're beginning to see evidence of the numbers of children who died. We know that there were probably lots of sites similar to Kamloops that are going to come to light in the future. And we need to begin to prepare ourselves for that. Those who are survivors of the residential schools, including the intergenerational survivors, need to understand that this evidence is important to make available to Canada so that Canada can understand the magnitude of what it is that they did and what it is that they contributed to, but also can understand the magnitude of their responsibility to stop hiding the documents, to force the churches who have documents to disclose those documents so that we can get to the truth of that experience. Since the revelation of what was discovered at Kamloops has come to light, I have been inundated with phone calls from survivors by the dozens, if not hundreds now. They've called me, often just to cry, just to tell us, I told you so. I told you that this had happened. And now we're beginning to see it. And in their voices, I can hear not only the pain and the anguish, but also the anger that they were feeling about the fact that nobody believed them when they told those stories. And in addition to that, I can also hear their sense that they've lost some hope. They've lost the faint glimmer of hope that maybe the children who they knew did not return maybe had gone away to live somewhere else and still might be found. And now they think that maybe that might not be feasible, that option might not be available, and I can hear that as well. So my heart goes out to the survivors. My heart goes out to the children of survivors and the families of survivors who never made it back. I know this is a hard time, but we must persevere. We must persevere in our continued investigation of what we need to know about these schools. And at the same time, we need to ensure that we work hard to try to put in place healing programs and foundations that will help survivors to be able to gather from time to time in order to share their common experiences. Just like veterans from the wars are allowed to gather together in their own unique places, we need to provide such places for survivors of residential schools as well. So I pray for you all. I hope that you can find a way to be able to continue on with your life in a good and healthy way despite this revelation. I hope that you are able to see that there is something here that we can do about this. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thanks a lot, Andrew, and for showing that. It's, you know, it's really hard to watch, and knowing that the survivors weren't believed, right? And that Justice Sinclair had to come back and say these words. And we cannot turn around and say that we didn't know any longer, because 6 years leading up to the Truth and Reconciliation and before the class action suit, there was witnesses and there was stories. 6 years of going coast to coast to coast, of hearing statements and stories through the TRC. And then now 5 years of the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation. And I believe there's only 10 out of this 97 calls to action that has even been addressed. Yesterday, there was also the release of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, and that the Native Women's Association has said that they don't want to work with the federal government any longer because it's too dysfunctional. They hold the purse strings. And I believe everything that Justice Sinclair said there, that Indigenous residential school survivors need a place just like our veterans. We need to have a residential school survivors place that they can have and come and share the common experience. This is difficult, and I'm putting the smudge right in my face because I need this as well, just to smell it and to feel and not to be, get caught up in my own emotion and my own anxiety. I'm just, I want to say that I'm actually honored that the town of Oakville has decided to do this program with us, because it takes very brave people to put this in a brave space for us to come and tell these and share these stories. And I keep on saying stories, statements, and our history, the history that you were robbed of as well when we were growing up, and the history that you were robbed of, even if you were just a newcomer in the 1950s, this is still your history to own and your history to learn from. Jody, do you want to have any comments at all?
I don't know. I feel like, as I'm listening to him, this is the work that we chose to do, Sherry and I, and we chose to do it, but it's actually a real big gift to be able to do this work. And as painful as it is and how it comes up all the time, we were meant to do this. And I don't know if anyone here can see how far ahead we are in what we need to do as a community right now, because there are so many out there that are so disconnected in silos, and that we're stuck in the old way of doing, being in a system of just being in a system that they're used to, that they can't break out of. And I can't, in all of this and everything that you said, Sherry, I feel so grateful in this moment to know that, we started to have these conversations in December about what we needed to create. We started talking about that. We had the ceremony, Tanya, that you talked about. We had that in September because they were the calls for justice and the calls for action we've been working on for months. And we do this because we're guided by elders that never said no to us. We said we needed something in our community because it wasn't working. It wasn't working for Indigenous people, and we needed to do something about it. And even though, people have it in their heart, they want to do something, they just don't know, you just do it, right? We just have to find a way to show up and do it. And so to know that we are on the right track, I'd really like to, like Sherry said, just know that there's some time that we can, if you have something to ask, get the conversation going. Like, jump in, help me out.
Just like Jody's dog has something to say, I'm sure. But, if anybody wants to ask a question, how they're feeling, please, we really open this up just for you to unpack, for you to ask questions, because there may not be someplace or other people that you may be able to turn to. We shift our focus a little bit more from what we actually planned on talking about when we did the planning with the town of Oakville, and we shifted it to this because this is really important. It's it's in our mind's eye. It just happened, and also to know that this is not news to us, but it's the collective trauma, right, that really impacts us. And to have that collective trauma is numbing. And thank goodness that Nabil is here to be able to help us through some of our own trauma, because I know from myself, and it's been a very difficult week. And I work for a school board, and I've asked them to give me space. That no, don't be asking me to give you resources to help you feel like you're doing something. We have this great friend of ours called Google that you can just go and ask Google, books that you can go and read. right? CBC does a fantastic job. And it seems like time and time again, we're on the ground doing the work and asked to do the work and lead the work. And we're here because this is our community. I live in Halton and Jody lives I live in Milton and she lives in Oakville, but nonetheless, we still live in the same region. And to know that we've been doing this work for a long time, and then finally, you know, maybe gaining some traction with some allies, maybe getting some traction with like, how can I help you? Maybe getting some traction by saying, what else can I do? It's wonderful that, you know, that we have so many people here. And we have some, I know I saw some journalists that names were in here too, that the journalists are there as well to write the story, but they also were robbed of the same history. And I remember reading a book about, it was called Seeing Red. And it talks about how the journalists and right across the country back in during 1885, 1889, of how the country was told the stories of the rebellion, right? The 1885 rebellion. And it really goes to show how it is, how it's one-sided. And now that we see that this has unearthed 215 bodies, possibly maybe even 5,000 more to come. So this is just the beginning. And how are we as Canadians going to revel with that? We can talk and we can write to our MPs, but we have to also remember that they're part of the problem, right? They're elected and you're elected officials, but they're also part of the problem. Now, the chief of the community in Kamloops had said one of the things that has to happen is to dismantle the Indian Act. And I am all for dismantling the Indian Act and get rid of that bureaucracy. Because when the bureaucracy is there, it's the Canadian government that tells you how many millions of dollars that Indigenous folk get. They don't get that money. It goes into the bureaucracy. If we have a $7 billion budget, almost 65% of that budget goes to paying for the MPs, MPPs, doing anything when it comes to Indigenous people. If we had $7 billion that we could do how we see fit, we would have clean drinking water. If the Canadian government can set a dart into war-torn countries and they can have drinking water in 24 hours, how come we can't have drinking water within 24 hours? These are realities. Six Nations just down the road from us doesn't have clean drinking water. Only certain people that are on the town line, right? One of our elders says that he can't even grow his garden because the water's contaminated. That's in Six Nations, 45 minutes away from Oakville. Mississauga's accredited, the same thing. Even though you are on traditional territory, their water is not as good as Oakville's. The MPs have reached out. You know, if there's anything that I can do, let us know. And I told them, let's set up a center for residential school survivors so that they have a place to come to. Why does the residential school survivors at the Mohawk Residential School have to raise money for their Mohawk village? And that should just be here, right? I'm not saying that there's a blank check, but there needs to be more accountability from Indian Affairs. Indian Affairs is the only department that I know that does not give Canadians a fair and transparent accounting of their dollars. I see a question here that said that one of the most important things people can do is to write their MPs a letter and follow calls to action. Absolutely. Call them on it, right? When we look at the 94 calls to action, everybody has a place in there, even our municipality. Every single municipality in Canada has signed on to this thing called the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. And they too, in that document, have a job, they have calls to action that they have to do. The region of Halton has calls for action, just like any municipality and any organization. A foundation here in Oakville has the philanthropic, the declaration of action that all these philanthropic organizations have decided that they've signed on seven steps that they want to do and learn and remember so that they can educate their community foundations. And those community foundations are the ones that give money away to the community. So if they don't have those kinds of actions, then it lands on deaf ears. And, you know, one of the things that's on their declarations is to listen with respect, compassion, and empathy while reaching out to those who have given voice to the tragedy that was in the Indian residential school system, understand the cumulative impact of unresolved trauma passed from generation to generation, as well as to remember voices that were silenced. That's just one. And if they were doing one within any sort of community foundation, they would have an understanding of how difficult this work is. Now,
Say too, Sherry, if you don't mind.
yep.
I just like to reference the TRC. If you haven't looked at it, it's the this is just a book that they've created. They hand them out. Organizations buy them and then they can get them. But you can download or upload. I always get that mixed up. From Google or whatever, the calls to action, and I always refer to 92, number 92, when it comes to business, because you all work for somebody. If it's not yourself, it's an organization. This call for action is the one where we all sit under. If your boss, your job, your organization is not doing anything about TRC and what your responsibility of to Indigenous people, to educating you, to having something embedded into your practices. For example, my sister works for an insurance company. She's a claims officer and she's in crisis all the time because she's fielding phone calls from First Nations, you know, families that are in crisis because of something, and they have no idea how to handle, you know, the situation. And that's just one little tiny area, right? That they have no idea how to respond to something that they're dealing with on a regular basis in their own communities, and then having to go through a system that oppressed them is more challenging, right? So you're constantly you know, traumatizing them because they have to, you know, there's nothing out there to support them. So I would suggest just read it through, and you know, as you become more comfortable with the news, that's, you know, that's because there's going to be a lot of information coming out right now. There's going to be a lot of information, conversations about how you move forward, what you can do. And, you know, Sherry said this, you know, the residential school survivors, for some reason, we are Grandmother's Voice. What we do we're one step ahead. I really feel, you know, we were already in conversation with our residential school survivors from our speaker series in February. They were on for a week with us, and when we heard them speak, we're like, okay, let's get through this, and then we need to come back to you, because what do you mean you don't have this park up already? What do you mean you don't have the money? What do you mean? So, you know, and me as an entrepreneur, I'm like, whoa, this doesn't make sense. You know, all of this money is being funneled for you, the learning, the people, the actual people directly affected by the genocide. And all you want is a park. So right away, we were campaigning, even though we're in the middle of building this beautiful space for our community, we're like, no, that's TRC, that's action. Right? So we're doing a campaign to say, hey, you know, while we're doing our space, at the same time, go donate here for this park, you know? So we start our speaker series next Thursday with them. And every Thursday from now, this next Thursday, right up until September 30th, which is a Thursday, will be our speaker series. And they want it to be survivors to thrivers. That's what they want to call it. Survivors to thrivers, you know, residential school survivors sharing their story to heal. And those are the people that are going to heal us. And so I think there's something going on here, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, Daniel. Are you okay over there, Daniel?
Yeah, of course. No, I know that we prompted folks to ask questions, so I just wanted to make sure that some were answered. I did pose one when there was none, and I have had I'm going to post the link in the chat, but CBC News actually has an interactive map regarding where you can search your location, and then the residential schools in the area. The closest for us in Halton GTA would be Mohawk Institute in Brantford, it would seem.
Actually, on that note too, if you don't mind, I'll just mention yesterday we spoke. It was very candid. I had one of those really, we had like Sherry said, a really busy week. Like we've been fielding calls from people from all over because our speaker series took us across the nation this year. So we were emailing, Facebooking people that, you know, whatever. Anyway, so we got on a call with Roberta Hill and Ida Martin, and it's on our Facebook YouTube, where we needed to have this conversation because I had just been on CTV on the morning show on Tuesday, coincidentally. And this is, if you don't mind, I'll share this real quick. You know, they saw, you know, they got the story and they wanted to focus on our story, you know, Grandmother's Voice and what we've been doing and, you know, how we're helping the community. And the minute that this news got shared, it was, hey, you know, can we talk about how you were affected personally by residential school? Was your family? And I had to call Sherry right away. I was like, what is this? Are you kidding me? Like now they want me, and I don't, you know, I'm not, Sherry's the, you know, the details and the, I want to say not educated one, but you know, from that, the right language, she's like, that's performative, Jody. You know, and so we had to really sit back and go, whoa, right? Like they wanted me to go on there and, you know, cry and, you know, show how, and I had to say no. I said, no, I have to do what's right in my heart. And what we're doing right now is supporting our community, Indigenous people. But anyway, I don't even know what I was going to say. Where was I going with that, Sherry? Kind of jump in.
There is, I'm just catching you guys up in terms of some of the chat contributions. So Kirsten added that there's an official House of Commons petition for the government to uphold a treaty relationship with the Haudenosaunee on the Grand River territory. So I'm sure those folks would appreciate additional signatures if the 94 guests in our room are willing to give them. It looks like Andrew has also shared the 94 calls to action. It looks like that's I didn't open it, but I believe that's the TRC's 94 calls to action sheet. Nancy Kelly, and if you don't mind, I'll just read some of these out. So regarding the calls to action, it seems to me that it's for us who wish to be allies to choose one we resonate with and even find small ways to support it. I believe she's referring to the calls to action. One idea I have is to research and learn about the history of the Mississaugas of the Credit. In addition, she started to scrapbook local trees and plants. Lovely idea. Angela Jackson has posted a link as well for donating to the Mohawk Village Park. Thank you. Katie poses a question. How appropriate would it be to create an Indigenous student association in high school, especially if it is led by a non-Indigenous teacher?
If it's in our, like within our school board, we have an awful lot of people that we work with very, very closely. And if it's led by a non-Indigenous teacher, they would have had an awful lot of professional development, as well as maybe they also have that experience already. There's only 2 of us doing the work, and there's 50 some odd high schools, our schools in our board. So that is, to me, that's an ally. And if it's an Indigenous student association that's run, it's up to that's a good thing, because the student body and the teachers and the students need to learn this. We need to have Indigenous education. We need to have Indigenous literature in our schools. And we also have other subjects that can be taught. So an Indigenous Student Association would also assist in making sure that those courses are being taught. So I'm all for having an Indigenous Student Association, because I know we have quite a few, and well, not quite a few, we have a few, but I also know who's running them, and they also come to me for that professional guidance and for any sort of support.
Thank you. A comment here from Julie, just in regards to trying to spend money with Indigenous communities. Definitely like that, especially it looks like she has family that is out in Brantford to go in and visit and ensure that your money enters that economy. That's a great suggestion. Nancy,
What are we, I'm sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say what I lost track of was that yesterday when we had Roberta and Ida on, they spoke a lot about, they really shared a lot of really good information about where they are right now as residential school, which one's existing, which one we're closest to, and why that specific location is very important for pretty much all of Canada. Woodland Cultural Center was the first, which was the Mohawk Institute Indian Residential School. That was the first residential school in Canada. And they talk about why it's so important for them to create the park that Woodland, like the Six Nations of the Grand River, the council gave them 5 acres on the same property to do this, to create this park. And, you know, now with this information out there, and knowing that they have to, you know, check the property there as well, they're saying, you know, maybe this was the reason why, is because we know that there are bodies there. And so, but if you wanted to go onto that link, it was a very ad hoc kind of candid conversation to say, you know, tell us what you need, what do you want to do? And they have a lot of information about what they've already done. And just to kind of give you some background on why that position, or why that place, and why they're doing donations there. And you have to remember too, if you don't mind, there's you know, all of these organizations that were set up, like the TRC, and then they have the Indian Residential School Support Programs. These are all programs supported by government, you know, that get funding, and they do support the residential school survivors, but the survivors are they got their payout, and it's just them. They support each other right now. So this is one of the reasons why the request was go look, find these residential school survivors, find a space and create it for them to come and visit.
Kate, I just want to just add on to Nancy's question, that if you are considering starting an Indigenous Student Association, please contact your Indigenous Education Advisor for your board and ask how you set one up. And so that you're not appropriating too, because you're not wanting to take up voice, you want to be supportive, right? Why has the church and the government resisted in providing records and searching for other sites? Because they're complicit. The Canadian government has refused a lot of the records under Stephen Harper, and the churches, of course, because they're complicit in it. The churches, all the churches in Canada have apologized except for the Roman Catholic Church, and every single church had provided their compensation. So the compensation package that came with the TRC, well, came from the TRC, or the compensation package that made up the payout package for the residential school survivors and created the TRC, as well as the support, came from the Canadian government need to commit $25 million, as well as all the churches. So you end up getting $1.7 billion roughly when you kind of do the math. And it's been the Catholic Church that has not paid its compensation package. And it was through a legal loophole during around that time of the election, when Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau were, who was going to be the prime minister. And during that time too, when Stephen Harper probably knew that he was not going to be our prime minister, there's evidence that there was shredders going to Parliament Hill to shred the documents. So the government is complicit in this, and they know. So what they should be doing is giving sonar radar to every residential school without cost. So, you know, there is an awful lot, but Jody said, it's the survivors that are still on their own doing the work by themselves, and they shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have to be doing the work at all.
So just
sorry.
again, I apologize that we're going through these quickly, folks. If you are writing comments, I just want to ensure that it's being shared. So Lubna did weigh in, just sharing for folks who check out the Woodland Cultural Center in Brantford, former site of the Mohawk Residential School. And there was a bit of a thread going on here of just regarding online tours. So if you would be interested, there are some links. I believe Kristen or Vivian mentioned here that they occur every third Wednesday of the month. So links are provided there. Kristen also provided a reminder that the federal government is currently taking residential school survivors to court regarding their settlement. I don't know if there's any comment you want to share on that. There's a question here from Wendy regarding the Iroquois Ridge Garden. So that is just at Iroquois Ridge Community Center at Glen Ashton, just east of Trafalgar and H Line, just at the entry of the Iroquois Ridge Community Center.
The Healing Garden, I think you're referring to the one in Milton, the one that we just designed. Was that, did you say that?
Yeah, sorry, you filled that in. That's at Country Heritage Park in Milton. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
But that's part of my story is the government. When I spent 15 years, about 15 years, maybe a bit longer, doing my genealogy, finding my family. And when I finally found my family, I had all of the information from everywhere and took it to the government, finally got through to the Indian Affairs. And then they actually called me and said, I have your father's file right here. And I was like, oh my gosh, finally. And they said, oh, sorry, it's sealed. And I said, well, what does that mean, sealed? Like, he's dead and he's got a brother who wants it too. And, he's not the same parents, but it's mine, it's my dad's. And they're like, nope, sorry, it's sealed. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, it's sealed. So they couldn't tell me my father's birth father. And he was in, the 60 scoop as well. So what I did in that moment is I stopped doing what they wanted me to do, which was spend a lot of time in going in circles. And I just said, okay, I'm going to surrender. Then if they tell me that my ancestors telling me what to do, then I'm just going to connect to that and not worry about what they're trying to do to us. So I think it's really important that, along with all of this learning that we're doing right now, that everyone really, when you're closing your eyes, and thinking about all of this information that you're being, delivered, you really feel it and get connected to what your purpose is and all of it.
I just want to identify, Jody, we certainly encourage you to continue. It is 6:59. I'm conscious of the fact that we will not be done by 7 o'clock. So we'll just sort of spill over a few minutes. And if you have to leave, feel free to welcome to do so. Just catching up again, Julie Carl just commented about the Anglican Church closing their archives to the public. There is a lot of history regarding faith institutions as it relates to the treatment of Indigenous peoples that, and as Nancy mentioned, so there's a link here to a 10-week, once a week online series. 10 weeks, however many, there is a lot of history left to be unturned. The Secret Path is another interesting, great resource. The story of Cheney Wenjack is one story, but I'm sure it's representative, as we heard from a common experience of folks, children leaving residential schools.
Before everyone leaves, I just wanted to share, I was contacted today by Stephen Paquette. I'm not sure if many of you know him or not, but we have a little Facebook group in Halton called Halton Indigenous Region, something like that anyway. And so he reached out and asked if there was going to be a grandmother's voice representative at this ceremony or a gathering that they're having at Lions Park. So the Indigenous community has, organized a gathering at Lions Park at 2:15 this weekend. And, you know, and I'm not really in line with, you know, the restrictions and what's happening because I'll be out of town. But I just wanted to mention that. And however you all feel, you know, if you wanted to look into it, I'm sure that you can find something on social media if you wanted to offer something.
Yeah, I do know that there's concerns around gathering as it relates to the ceremony. So I believe that they're trying to keep it to invited individuals only from Mississaugas of the Credit, so that they can ensure that the ceremony is taking place. But no, it is important to know that those things are happening in the community. Absolutely.
Well, I saw people sitting in their cars at another one,
And
and they made a little bit of extra, you know, I don't know.
public health is
I always think outside the box, Daniel, you know that.
public health is down the hall from me, so I can't
Yeah.
speak to you. Sorry again. So I'm just trying to catch up on people's comments, and I know that Sherry had some quick things that she wanted to share as takeaways that people can do this evening. It looks to be communication between each other. Andrea has come to the healing spaces are so needed for those still living with the unresolved trauma, and of those still here. Yeah, the erasure of lives, taken lives, absolutely. And thank you for sharing, Andrea, grandmother who attended Spanish residential school near Sudbury, did not want herself or her children to be known as Indigenous, and told her auntie that she liked her sister better because she looked whiter. She ultimately wanted good lives for them, but without prejudice. So she married 2 different white men and lost her status. Still had 3 children taken away before 1966 that she's aware of. She died in 1976, at only the age of 44. I say she survived residential school, but she did not survive the trauma. Thank you. Yeah, that's, again, it's so sad to hear these stories in isolation, to know that there's such a volume of them. Vivian expressed her sympathies.
Daniel, should we just go up with the 7 takeaways for people?
Yes, I apologize to everyone
Yeah.
who's written comments in the chat. We always try to be conscious of time when we're in doing our programs, and I see that it's after 7 o'clock now. So I will share your deck, Sherry, and you can.
Mm-hmm. And there is a pledge there that if you go to 215 pledge on the Cheney Wenjack, that was one of the last comments that I saw. But this is what you can do either today, this weekend, you know, just to make your hearts a little lighter. You know, you can light a candle, you can say a prayer, sing a poem, sing a song, write a poem, how it makes you feel. Do whatever makes you to move, to help with your spirit, and how to, you know, help those spirits make their way to the ancestors. And have an outdoor fire. Now we have a beautiful, beautiful evening, and place some cedar on the fire and share your thoughts and prayers with your families. Make a commitment to read and learn more. There are a multitude of resources available from early years to adult. Review and understand how you can make space for the day-to-day learning of First Nations, Métis, Inuit history, as well as contemporary First Nations, Métis, and Inuit realities. Then engage in your own personal conversations with your own circles. And sometimes that's really difficult because that might spark an awful lot of contention in your families. But at least you're starting the conversation, and how you can begin to have a different relationship with those who are different than you. Understand and use your own privilege. Place your feet on the land. Take time to listen, smell and feel what's around you, and hold space and support those who do this work. We are weary, but like Jody said, we do this work because we're called to do. So again, I just want to thank everybody for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week. Please take care of yourself. We've held smudge in our house for you. If we were in a circle, we would have the smudge lit all the time that we were here. But please take care of yourself and have a nice weekend, and we'll see you next week.
There's just one more thing I wanted to leave folks with. You've probably seen these coming up on local media outlets and stuff. This This is just today outside of our Oakville Museum. We've started to notice that residents have begun to bring children's shoes. We've seen them come up through the country, 215 children's shoes to mark, almost a symbolic gesture of, I'm not really sure. I mean, it seems like it's a visual statement in terms of the volume of children that were lost at that one site. But it's also, I mean, for me, I need something physical typically when I experience emotion. So after this, I welcome if anyone wants to join me, keep my distance, but I'll be going down to Oakville Museum just to contribute shoes. I feel like I need some type of physical outlet for that, for my emotions. I know, usually when you're angry, which many of us are, it's helpful to have something to take that out on. But hopefully this is just a small sign of solidarity as we start to see these little symbols pop up around our communities. But thank you all so much. I did promise that at the end of our session, I would leave these numbers back up. I will leave these open for a period of time. We will end the program and I'll stop recording. If anyone needs more information regarding crisis or trauma support contact information, you're welcome to stay till the end. I'll leave the room open for a few moments, and Nabil and myself will be here to provide any more resources. Otherwise, maybe I'll see you at Oakville Museum later on in the evening. And Jody, I see last words to you.
Yeah, sorry, if you don't mind, I'd just like to share something that came up with us during our ceremony with the grandmothers the other night. And it was about these little shoes. Okay, and it was about the spirits of these children and how we are dealing with this situation, and that those shoes do represent the children. But we also have to just keep in mind and know that if we believe in the Creator and we believe in the spirit world, that those children were taken care of once they met the Creator in the spirit world. And Sherry, I don't know, I think I may have seen it on your Facebook page. We should share that picture with Daniel because it was so beautiful that I saw. And it just speaks to that exactly about that. But just being mindful that we did that smudging of the dresses, Tanya, for a reason, right? That those dresses were out in community for a long time, and we just have to be mindful of the shoes as well, right? That when they're taken down, that they're taken down and they're cared for, and not left up probably too long. And I don't know that I know that the conversations happen, like at the residential school, they put them up and they took them down. They didn't leave them. So I think that we have to be mindful of those. The protocols should be discussed with the elders, because the same with us at we had our ceremony and we took the shoes and we gave them a space to go to after. So please, if you don't mind, if you can let your community members just be more mindful, be mindful of that.
Yep.
Putting them up and really stating when they'll be taken down. And so I appreciate that. And just again, it's just to let people know that the spirits were taken care of. All of this that we're doing right now, like you said, Daniel, is for yourself. And we have to work on that, right? Everyone has to take care of their own spirit here. And so I appreciate that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, have a peaceful evening. We'll see you all next week.